Oh, what's going on, boys? This is Grim Reaper bringing you One Punch Man 177. We've been having a lot of audio issues and a lot of technical issues in general. Just getting the things fleshed out. But aside from that, let's get it popping. Because there's some things that we want to talk about in general, not just in reference to 177, but also in reference to what the hype is for the future of 178, as well as the culmination of the information that we've gotten so far in like 173, 174, 175, 176, because it seems to somewhat fold together. We're focusing on the back end, or the underlying actions, nefarious intentions, and nefarious consequences of the different things that the association has, I guess, done in the past or has continued to do in order to get to where we are today, in order to have the funding that we have now, in order to achieve what we've been able to achieve. There's an overall question that I think is fair to pose in reference or in contrast to Saitama. Would the heroes, or would the Hero Association be what it is now if they didn't have to undergo the same dirty tactics that they have been going through now? As far as we can tell, Saitama is one of the few heroes who started the series off by declaring and having the actual mantra of a hero for fun. And we haven't necessarily heard that in a long time, and it's kind of gone to the wayside, but it's actually something we should pay attention to and we should actually reference more often. Saitama really did start the story off as an inception of excuse me sorry about as an inception of, I'm doing this for fun, or I'm a hero for fun. And now we're at the point to where we're seeing what it may actually necessarily take to run a hero association. Now, in my reaction and in my first interpretation of what happened here, yeah, I was standoffish and I was, pointing out the same obvious thing that everybody else was, that like, there's a torture chamber here, like, we're selling monsters to different organizations for experiments. You can even do experiments here. Like, the association is dirty. The things that we saw Tsukuyomi do in the past to Tatsumaki, the association is doing now, here, today. To what end, we're not sure of. We don't have all the details of. But that's the truth. We knew from back in the day, like whenever we first met the executives, or whenever we first saw their meetings and discussions about the goings ons, and the increased disasters that were happening, and how they were discussing about how they were going to go about handling that issue back in the day, like when Darkshine first showed up, or when the Monster Association was first having their disturbances, and when monsters were still not unanimously coming about. But here we get a better grasp of how dirty and how low these guys are willing to go. Now, aside from that backstory there, because it does somewhat lead into what's going on here. I know we talked about previously. I'm not sure if the video had audio or not. I'm not sure which one it was, but I mentioned previously that seeing that these individuals are experimenting to create monsters, and there are different forms of monstrification into turning into monsters. Not just the natural sense that we know, or it seems to be, God is influencing. That's still our own theory. And it's not that they're just naturally coming up out of nowhere, which it seems to be the claim right now. But also that there are organizations that are creating monsters, hence the House of Evolution, and now Tsukuyomi. As we saw with those monsters in the past, as we saw with the experiments with Tatsumaki, and as we see here with now the official declared, or what's being assumed as like the declared truth of the situation, that cool. All right, just checking just make sure that everything was running straight. But now we're actually seeing this play out. So, is it possible that, and this may just be us scooping all the information, everything that we can into this theory, but is it possible that these people are being influenced by God? Like, we talked about way back in the past that, like, Psycho Steven herself, when they first started the little science psychic group or whatever with Fubuki, that Psycho Steven herself was talking about the annihilation of the human race back in the day. So that technically throws a wrench into our theory that, like, maybe not every single instance of monstrification or great evil with the intent of destroying all of humanity is derived or has its roots in God. This kind of adds more to that argument against the theory. Because are we going to claim that the House of Evolution was inspired by God? We can't say that, right? We can't pretend that Tsukuyomi's entire reason for going about their things or their experiments they're doing is because of God's inspiration. No, there's no declaration of that. No. What this does clearly show us, though, is that if we're not going to go with that interpretation, but that there are still multiple and many different ways in which we're going to get threats and monsters in the world of One Punch Man. It makes it curious, though, as to why we didn't get this as much so often way back then. But it also does, it gives more credence into filling in that gap, right? Because the association only had its inception a few years ago, like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, as far as I can remember. Where Saitama actually started to go about his things. From his first inception with Crablanta, the association wasn't around, right? It was his actions that inspired, coincidentally, the creation of the Hero Association. So, how far back before that were we getting these, like, crazy monsters? The fact that Crablante showed up and they fought him means that they were aware of monsters. The fact that Blast was around fighting back then means that they were aware of monsters back 20 years ago. Like, the fact that we saw that monster in the lab means that there were monsters back 20 years ago. The fact that that EC was around back then means that there were monsters 20 years ago. So, how long have there been monsters? Like, do we have to go and add more to the theory again to pretend to say that monsters have been around since the beginning because of God? Like, it leaves that viewpoint open. Like, there's still more to, like, 1 second. Dogs and vacuums, sorry. It's ridiculous. So that's where the things that have been happening so far have been taking me. When thinking about what we just got out of, how climactic, how titanic the threat that God presented to us was. And then, in the aftermath of the arc, we get Genos, who recounts the tales of what actually occurred in the actual resolution. While Sitch and the boys still see that as an implausible theory, or as a theory, the truth of the matter is that Genos' answers and the encounters that Flashy and the boys had on the surface do coincide with the reality of what Blast told us, and what Blast understands and what Sitch understands, that there is an entity known as God that may be around doing things. And they did also at the same time discuss that the inception of monsters may have something to do with God. That was alluded to heavily. All they really pointed out was that the inception of monsters is spontaneous, and that's a problem. Whatever the case is, it's interesting to see a type of House of Evolution type setup coming out of here, and I want to see if we get more growth and emphasis on that, or if we do something else. Because the Tsukuyomi guy was cool, but I wanted to see more of him. Like, don't get me wrong. I understand that there's a good chance that they're still going to be around doing more, and this may not have been their strongest guy. But he gave me a really good impression aesthetically as a character, just like they're usually going to do with Murata. And I wanted to see more of him. And I don't like when Tatsumaki's involved too often, because the disparity in strength is often a problem. You have to pull tactics like this individual did here, with like these like poison pills, or like these pills that can be like ruptured using his psychic powers. Like, that's cool and all, but it shows how underhanded, or what like non-offensive tactics he had to take in order to ensure that his plan would go through. That Tatsumaki is still the pinnacle of strength, and that even an organization creating psychics isn't enough to compete up against her. Ashley was talking down to them, that was the truth. They aren't capable of making psychics that strong. But this psychic is indeed powerful. This is, I would say, like a high demon to a low dragon, mid-dragon level psychic. Yes, Giro was incapacitated. Yes, when Fubuki encountered Psycho, Psycho was incapacitated. Yes, when Fubuki encountered Psychos, she was also exhausted from a huge, long fight, tough fight. Fine. Agreed. Understood. I get that. I'm not 100% sure still of this guy's capabilities, but he's competent. So I'd like to see more of Tsukuyomi. Now, I've been seeing a lot of this hype and talk and discussion about Tatsumaki and Saitama. No, I haven't been spoiled. No, I don't necessarily know any like context of what's going to happen next. But the hype that people are talking about, you see thumbnails everywhere talking about, oh, I've been waiting for this moment for so long. Once again, it's these webcomic individuals like ruining the story first. Like, sure, now they're communicating that it's hype. Graham, excuse me. Yeah, it's cool knowing that something hype's coming up, but at the same time, it also kind of ruins what the scenario is, because in the actual context of the story and not knowing what's going to happen next or anything like that at all, I would have no reason to like believe that this would be like a good fight. Like, yes, it's number one, it's the number two hero versus like Saitama. Sure, I have no reason to believe that they're actually going to fight. She didn't actually fight Genos back when Boros came around. She just slammed him into the ship, like, get out of my face, like, and Saitama was right there. Like, he knows of her attitude when he first went up to the Hero Association as well, too. He knows of her attitude. Like, he knows that aspect. But, like, that's what I was assuming it would be. It would just be him scolding her, like, hey, relax, like, calm down, what are you doing? And she's pissed. What, she's going to attack Saitama again? Like, or Saitama? Like, it's just not going to be, like, the whole Gino scenario. During the Monster Association arc, towards the end, we got a cool setup for the different heroes who have now seen or gotten grasps of Saitama's power, inklings of what the truth is. And their dynamics have and are going to change. Even in the aftermath of the arc, we're seeing these like lower class heroes in the A class or B class or C class, so in the vicinity of Saitama, that are also noticing the peculiarities of Saitama and the instances that he's gone through. So it's not as if Tatsumaki hasn't been exposed to these, but this is obviously going to be a direct exposure. How is she going to take it? Like, is she going to be on the Geno side? Or is this more of like an oblivious, not necessarily sure how strong he is? Because Bang thinks that Saitama's Kagdizo big strong, but it's because he saw the meteor punch. Like, Bang still thinks that King saved the day, I believe. From my understanding is, yeah. So, like, that King came in and bopped EC. So, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I am expecting, if this is going to be a fight, I do expect it to be terrific, like drawn, maybe quick. But it is going to be like, Saitama's just chilling. Like, we just saw a Jupiter Buster. Even if he doesn't have that same strength, if it's decreased, he's still... like, he's still that thing. He still fought Garou. Like, he still fought Garou. So, let's see what happens here. I'd love to see a badass display, but she's obviously, or I'm not saying obviously, I don't think she'll be destroying the Hero Association headquarters here. I think there's too much innovation that we've been introduced to for Saitama, or excuse me, for Murata and one to just remove it. Like, all these people moving into the facility, like, things are changing now. They're talking about expanding it as well, and we're going to destroy it. That doesn't necessarily make sense. I could see it being the case for something new, but whatever came next, whatever was new, would have to be, like, exceptional. And I'm kind of looking forward to seeing more of the insides of the Superhero Association, of the Hero Association headquarters right now, to see, like, how stylish or how, like, fancy they can make it. Because we've seen some of the shops and some of the cities inside of, like, the different towns and cities in One Punch, and they're like, you know, they remind you of stereotypical Japan, you know, so it's kind of like familiarish in that sense. Not that I've ever been there, but, you know, I've seen it in different types of mangas and stories, so I relate to that. So I'm wondering how they're gonna design and display the actual Hero Association headquarters if we see it again, or if we get a chance to dive into it more. It looks like, or it looked like we were, especially because of all the different characters and all the different like somewhat relevant to kind of relevant plot points and characters being moved into that storyline, or at least being moved into this location, which is the Hero Association headquarters. So I thought that we were going to get more of those like side stories here, but we could still prominently still be in other cities. Like I'm still expecting to see multiple cities in Q City. I'm still expecting to see the first big fights or the first dragon fights for like the other portion of the S-Class heroes that we didn't get a chance to experience, like Metal Knight and Watchdog and the like. Like those boys still have to show up and make a difference, and I'm here for it. I'm anticipating it. I'm here for it. So let's see how that turns out. Tatsumaki versus Saitama. People are hyping it up to be like that thing. Let's see how it actually turns out. I'm expecting Saitama to clap and for nothing crazy to happen. So let's see how that turns out. Like the video, subscribe, and sorry for the delays, boys. Yo ho ho! What you mean, bitch? King did pop PC. These